Okay, picking up right where the last video left off about giving the player the ability to do a charge forward based on a double tap. Now we're going to do the opposite. You're going to do a jump back based on a double tap. It's very similar, but the major difference is that whereas the forward charge simply modified velocity and used the same velocity statement to continue moving forward, basically to do the jump back, you're going to have a separate get component statement to modify velocity to make them both go back horizontally and pop up in the air. And the reason why is because it's really kind of mutually exclusive. You don't want your character to be jumping back and be walking back at the same time. You want to lock out that ability. So this is built on exactly where we left off last time. I only made one modification. I simply put in this remark statement just as a demarcation point that says, okay, everything below this is the right movement. There will be one exception to that. And an additional complication is the fact that once we get the jump back in place, we have to modify these to say, okay, if you're jumping back, then you can't do these. So unless you're very explicitly making a game where, say, it's a one-on-one fighting game and they're jumping back but they can shoot forward, you would have to modify it accordingly, but at least this gives you the basis for it. So, first things first, we need a variable to track whether or not your character is in mid-jump. So you can just put that wherever you want. You could use a bool. I personally don't like using them, but certainly you can. It's easy enough just to use a string, change it to T or F. Functionally, I know very few differences between using a string and a bool, so I realize a bool can only be true or false, but effectively you can do it with a string as well, so that's personal preference. So just as we had to do three different checks for key input for moving right, we have to do the same thing for moving left, like I said, with one wrinkle though. Okay, so input, get key, tap left. So this is saying get key is an ongoing occurrence. So it's basically a rapid fire situation where as long as that key is down, this statement is going to occur because this is true. The wrinkle is we have to see if they are in mid-jump. So originally I was going to do this in an iterative manner where I showed you, okay, you can jump back, but really you have to kind of break the code if you do that. So I'd rather just show you the correct statement to begin with. So what you're saying is if the left button is pressed down and jumping is set to false, set to F, which it is to begin with, then go ahead and get component. What component? The rigid body 2D. Alright, what attribute? The velocity. Okay, what are we changing it to? We're changing it to a -2. The forward velocity is +2, so I suppose you could make the left, moving left, you could make that velocity slower because people tend to walk back slower than they walk forward, but again, that's just a balancing issue, preference issue. So as long as the key is down and jumping is set to F, then go ahead and apply that -2 velocity. Get key down. So now this is saying for the single frame that the key first is pressed down. So for that frame only, and again, is jumping set to F, then go ahead and increase left total. So if you recall, left total we defined up here, and this is going to be the amount of times you've pressed left. You press left once, starts the clock. If you press left again within half a second, then you will do the jump back. So that's basically saying, so again it's saying once you've pressed the key down and you're not jumping, then let's start tracking how many times you've pressed left. And I realize that obviously I can copy and paste faster than typing, so certainly, just pause the video if this is too quick. So third one, so we did get key for it being ongoing, pressed, get key down for the single frame that it first gets pressed down, and then get key up now for the single frame that it's let go, that the key is released. So again, get key up if it's true and you're not in the process of jumping. Get component, rigid body 2D, velocity, and you're setting velocity to 0. As I mentioned in the other video, the reason why you're doing this is so your character doesn't glide. If you want it to glide, then you just don't put this statement in, because this brings you to a more abrupt stop, because as soon as your key is let go, your velocity drops to 0. So if you want your character kind of like slip slide, then you just remove this one. So also, when you let go of the key, get component, sprite renderer, go back to the idle image. Now in this case, I didn't flip the image when you're walking backwards. You certainly could do that with a U-angler statement, and perhaps I'll put that at the end of the series. We're also not putting in any other kind of backwards walking animation. But this is really for the purposes of to make sure that it's showing the idle image that you're not moving. Kind of a fail-safe. So that's the key checks. Now we get into the monitoring of how many times keys have been pressed. So if left total is 1, so you've pressed the key down, total is set to 1, or it's increased by 1, I should say. So if left total is 1, and the time that and the timer, which we're about to start to modify, is less than 0.5, and at the beginning of the game it should be less than 0.5 because it starts at 0. So if left total is 1, timer is less than half a second, then here we go. Left timer delay is now increased by time.delta time, and that is the amount of time that has passed since the last time this statement has been run. Well, basically one frame, every frame, how much time has passed since the last frame. So you've pressed the key. If you've pressed the key once and the timer has not exceeded half a second, then go ahead and keep increasing the timer. Now, let's look at the other end of that. Left total is equal to 1, but you've exceeded or equal to half a second. You set the left timer delay back to 0, and you set left total back to 0. In other words, you're setting back the defaults. This is saying, okay, you pressed the key once, but you did not press it a second time within the allocated time period. Too much time has elapsed. Now we're going to reset it, and you have to start again, at least to perform this particular movement. I'd go into more explanation, but we really reviewed these concepts in the last video. Like I said, the only wrinkle is that now we're checking to see if you're in mid-jump. Okay, so we checked the two possibilities for a single left click. Now we're looking at if you've left clicked twice. So if left total is equal to 2, and the timer is less than half a second, then here we go. Is jumping is true. So that now locks these out. That's really the only reason why that statement is there, is so it locks out any additional movement. So is jumping is set to T, and again you could use a bool if you want. Left total is equal to 0, because if you don't set it back to 0, then that means you can only jump back once. So once you've done your jump back, you really need to set it back to 0 so you can jump back again. Get component sprite renderer. We're going to use the jump back image, which we assigned in the previous one. Get component rigid body 2D velocity, and here's the actual jump. It's a -4 horizontal and a 3 vertical, so you're jumping to the left and up. 2 bits left. if left total is equal to 2, but the delay is greater than half a second, then set these back to 0. Now, this is kind of a fail-safe, because you really shouldn't be at 2 and half a second, because if you're at 1 and half a second, then it shouldn't ever actually get to this, but it's a fail-safe. And now, the very last thing is going to add something a little bit different. I've only used in like one other video. And that is outside of, well, I deleted the void start because we weren't using it. But outside of void update, so you have to make sure it's outside of that the bracket for void, you have to add a new subroutine. So void on collision enter 2D. This is a predefined routine, so you absolutely have to spell it out exactly correct. Capital O, capital C, capital E, and it's 2D, so you got to make sure you do 2D. So void on collision enter 2D, collision 2D, and then other. So in other words, you're colliding with another object. So is this, if this occurs, so what this is saying is if a collision has occurred, okay, and it's collision, not trigger. So you're not talking an overlap, you're talking two solid objects bumping into each other. In this case, it's the playable character bumping into the ground. So on collision enter 2D has occurred because she's landed on the ground since she was jumping. So jumping is sent back to false, and you want to go back to the idle image because we changed it to the jumping image right here. So that should do it. And if you're going to do like a dust particle or something when they land, that's where you'd put it. You'd put it in here because, okay, she collided, so she landed, so now we're going to kick up some dust or something. So let's take a look at this. So I press the A key back. Works. Press the D forward. Just give us a space. Now I'm going to double tap, but not too quickly. Okay, so going good. Now I'm going to double tap quickly. There's the jump back, and she kind of slides back. So in this case, we're going to leave the slide because it kind of makes sense because they're not, you know, think of like a baseball player sliding in. They've got that momentum. It doesn't expire immediately. And like I said, you could do like a cloud, you know, dragging along the way. There's a charge forward still working. Now, here's the thing. If you double click back, you shouldn't be able to double click back again while you're in the mid jump. So that you could hear me do a third click and it did not change the jump. So that's key. That's really why you have to put in these, because you don't want them to be able to do additional backwards movement if they're in mid jump. Likewise, you're not doing a double back jump, which would you allow to do if you did that. And this is get key up, so you don't want them to suddenly stop moving, because since this has 0 velocity, if you allow this to occur in mid jump, it actually stop the jump right away. So it's vitally important that you do this additional coding. And now that you've done it here, you really need to put it down here too. That way you can stop them from moving forward when they're jumping backwards. So it's kind of quick, but let's see if I can make it happen. See how I was jumping by moved forward? So you can see why you need that code in place. So it'd just be as simple as taking this, and this is get key down, add the extra parenthesis in the front, and now that should prevent that from happening. Double jump back, and then press forward. See? She didn't move forward until you landed. So, like I said, it makes an additional complication because you're locked into that movement. So that's about it, actually. So you have any questions, just let me know.